Hello, this is Gen X PC Gamer Guy. I have been playing a game a lot in the past 2 months. It's really become a guilty pleasure of mine. It's called Satisfactory. This video has some valuable tips that I've accumulated playing the game for nearly 300 hours so far. I plan to put out a formal review of the game in another video. For the time being, let me share some of my experiences with the game. So let's get started. Tip number 1. Tricks when updating conveyor belts, conveyor lifts, and power poles. Any progress in this game eventually requires machinery to advance to higher levels of research and development. Any productive automation involves moving items and powering the machines used, like miners, extractors, refineries, constructors, assemblers, smelters, foundries, etc. To accomplish this, you will need to use conveyor belts, conveyor lifts, and power poles, all of which come in different versions. In the early part of the game, you learn to place conveyor belts for moving non-fluid items from a source to a destination. Storage containers are usually the source when feeding a factory. The factory then usually needs a storage bin to hold the contents created by the factory. As you make more progress towards the higher levels and more sophisticated things in the game, you can research improvements to the conveyor belts and lifts that allow faster input and output from storage containers and various machines. As I started to learn how to move non-fluid items around, I had always destroyed the old belt or lift and placed a new one manually. More specifically, with the conveyor lifts, I would place the replacement next to the old lift and then rearrange all the connecting belts. This was getting difficult when there was little room for additional conveyor belts next to existing belts. Well, by a happy accident, I was pleasantly surprised to discover that if you have the materials on hand and some spare space in your inventory, all you have to do is select the new type of belt or lift, hover over the old belt or lift, and it should present an option to replace. Then, it was just a simple click to replace. This was an awesome feeling of surprise and relief when I discovered it. So, I ended up placing belts and lifts knowing that I did not have to be concerned about replacements being nearby. Considering how much you eventually build horizontally and vertically over time, and where you build, this is really a great thing. Anything on the belt or lift at the time of the upgrade will show up in your inventory if you have the space. There will be a container where the old belt or lift existed with the items that cannot fit in your inventory. You can also downgrade the belts or lifts if you choose to do so. I really never had a need to do that. Power poles work the same way when you want to upgrade to a better version that allow more connections, and they can also be downgraded if you so choose. Tip number 2. Tricks for adding conveyor mergers and conveyor splitters. After a while, you will need to upscale your production to progress in the game. Therefore, you set up multiple item feeds to machines or collect items from multiple machines. For this reason, conveyor splitters and conveyor mergers are essential for efficiency, as you can see demonstrated here. One thing that was not obvious in the game was the ability to add splitters or mergers to existing conveyor belts without remaking all the existing belts. Well, this was another accidental discovery that proved to be a great time saver. Again, as long as you have the materials for the splitter or merger, all you have to do is hover over the conveyor belt, and it should present an option to put the splitter or merger in line with the belt. Then just click to add it, and it should be good to go immediately. Removing a splitter or merger usually leaves the old complete conveyor belt back to the way it was before the splitter or merger was added. Again, another pleasant surprise that this game helps you save time. Tip number 3. Tips when using Hypertubes. Hypertubes are a method of powered travel in the game that can be very useful. For example, if you set up a long enough Hypertube network, it basically means you can walk away from the keyboard until you reach your destination. However, there are dangers upon exiting the tube network. You are basically thrown out of it, so be careful where you place any exit. Or, one of the inadvertent or purposeful things you can do is place the exit close to another Hypertube entrance. This can cause you to exit one Hypertube and then immediately get sucked into a nearby Hypertube entrance, as was demonstrated. Of course, this can be very annoying if it wasn't on purpose. However, there is another trick with this game that I discovered on accident. You can reverse your direction in mid-tubing. I am very grateful for the game to allow this. It has helped in cases where I've set up exceptionally long networks. And I forgot to bring things with me that I needed at the planned destination. Being able to turn around in the tubes allowed me to grab the things I forgot without going back and forth throughout the whole network of tubes to grab what I needed. Tip number 4. A method for using smart splitters. Smart splitters are essential later in the game when you have so many things to keep track of and not the room to build separate belts for distributing every single unique item. Normal splitters equally split inputted items into available outputs. The first and improved versions of smart splitters allow selected items to exit to whichever side of the splitter that you want. Among one of the best features to take advantage of with smart splitters is the overflow feature. You can set up a belt to split off items into storage, not wanting items to get moved to another path, and if the storage gets full or down the line gets full, the overflow can go somewhere with this feature. My preference is moving the produced or mined surpluses into the awesome sink, and then at least get credit towards coupons to be traded in for some cool items. Tip number 5. Stacking storage items and fluids. Remember that you can stack all item storage bins and fluid buffers. The storage bins are for items only storage, and conveyor lifts can be used to move items between stacked bins. Here is an example of how I usually set up storage bins when getting into the larger production modes. I usually create 2 stacks of storage bins for items. I start with an initial large storage bin with the inputs pointed at whatever source. Then I create another large storage bin a bit of distance away to send the outflow of this first storage bin. As I need more storage, I add 2 bins on top of each of the existing bins, with the inputs and exits opposite of the bins below it. Using conveyor lifts, I have items ascend the bins above it and continue to the next stack at the bottom and top of the stack using conveyor belts. This stacking method only works for odd number of storage bins in each stack. For the other stack, all the items are destined to descend from top to bottom using conveyor lifts. Therefore, the bottommost storage bin in the second stack is where I collect items from and use elsewhere on that level. For a multiple floor setup, at a higher level I can collect from the stack as well. Fluid buffers work differently than item storage bins. Gravity matters. Or it sucks, depending on how you look at it. In order to move fluids higher than a few meters, one must put a powered pump in line with the pump system to move it higher. Gravity is naturally gonna help you move fluids to a lower level. Therefore, it is only a good idea to stack fluid buffers if you have ample power reserves to power the pumps and are running out of available real estate to place fluid buffers. Tip number 6. Clearing problems with machines when changing recipes. There is a generic problem you can encounter with the game when you change inputs on refineries, constructors, assemblers, smelters, and foundries. For generic purposes, I will call the inputs to these machines as part of a recipe which has specific components. If the prior components are not completely cleared out of the belts and lifts before changing recipes, then your new component feeds will not work as hoped. Here is why you are stuck. You cannot reach the last item to clear manually without removing the belt or lift, and then putting back the belt or lift. Or you can change back to the old recipe, let it feed, and then remove the component from the machine. So, if you're wondering why the machine doesn't seem to be feeding, it probably has an input component that does not fit the recipe stuck in a conveyor belt or lift feeding to the machine. I got into the habit of cleaning out all the feeds to the machinery before changing the recipe. In addition, I then check the machinery to remove the prior components after the feeds are apparently clear. Tip number 7. One simple tip when using vehicles to explore. Vehicles are an important part of the game. They are especially helpful in exploring and great for getting around in unsafe conditions. Other than running out of fuel, you can encounter terrain situations that you can't get out of when using vehicles. Simple. You think to yourself, why not disassemble the vehicle and recreate it? This is not a problem if you have nothing in the vehicle storage. Enough room in your inventory for the contents of the vehicle if there is things in the storage, or do not care about what you are carrying in the vehicle. However, when exploring or trying to get between places, you end up with inventories full of useful items. The safest thing to do is to bring the components for the same type of vehicle and create it in a safe place, and then move the inventory from one vehicle to the other. This has a safety benefit. You can quickly hop into either vehicle if too many creatures are around that might attack you. Simply deconstruct the old vehicle when the contents are transferred. And go off on your merry way with the new vehicle. This is the end of my video, helpful playing tips and tricks for the game Satisfactory. Again, I plan to put out a formal review of the game in another video. I am Gen X PC Gamer Guy, and thanks for watching my video.
We are just getting started on this site. Please subscribe if you like. Everyone be safe out there. Goodbye.